This is Andy Purewal for Boxing News. I'm joined by boxing legend, if you go with
Commentator,
that, commentator,
talking
legend.
dog.
Yeah, Jim Lampley of ppv.com. Jim, good to see you. How is life treating you?
Pretty well, and the planes landed with the shiny side up from North Carolina, where I now live, all the way here to LA. So it's good to be back in the basin, and looking forward to a great night of fights.
A great night of fights ahead, big night here in LA. Terence Crawford, Israel Madrimov. Just talk to me about this fight from your perspective, Jim. For Terence to move up to 154 and to face one of the leading names, if not the number one in the division immediately.
Well, I remember being in Las Vegas to call a top-ranked pay-per-view card quite a long time ago. And on the undercard, there was a fight that was aimed at grooming a South American fighter named Bradis Prescott for further progress in, I believe it was the 130-pound weight class at that time. And Top Rank had looked around and had cast about for the right opponent to put into the ring with Bradis Prescott, and the choice was a relatively unknown American from Omaha named Terence Crawford. And I remember going to a meeting the day before the fight and meeting this young man and thinking to myself, well, he's very resolute. I don't know how well he's going to do against Prescott, who is longer, taller, may have more technical gifts, but he's certainly here to compete. And Terence Crawford didn't lose a minute to Bradis Prescott. He dominated him from round to round to round. He made a name for himself on that pay-per-view undercard. And ever since that day, years ago, he's been Terence Crawford. So here we are to continue to cover one of these great American Rivertown boxing stories. Guys like Ezzard Charles and various others came from the same kind of Rivertown background that Terence is from. He's conscious of that. He fights in a rough-hewn, down and dirty American style with a lot of technical skill and a lot of understanding of the sport. And fans have grown to love Terence Crawford for what he does.
Jim, from Eddie Hearn's perspective, he's fallen short against Terence in the previous occasions. He's had a fighter go in against him, but he's hopeful that kind of Terence moving up in weight once again, this might just be a step too far. I know there's talk about Canelo-Crawford, which would be another couple of leaps up in weights, but is that a case at all? Can you make a case for maybe this being one weight too many on Saturday night for Terence?
We don't know until you see it. The thing with moving up in weight and ultimately moving past your level is that every single step is to some degree a step into the unknown. So we don't know where Terence Crawford tops out yet. We know that in terms of the mental, emotional, and competitive urge elements of the approach to the sport that are necessary to remain unbeaten the way he has, he's aces. He has it all. He has competitive drive, enormous confidence and assertiveness. He can fight with either hand. So at the end of the day, he has matched every test so far, and I haven't found a single media person here who's picking Madrimov to beat him, even though Madrimov is demonstrably bigger, stronger, has some logical advantages in the fight. Terence Crawford has won his argument as a great fighter. Now he's trying to move forward to capitalize on having won that argument by getting a chance to fight the number one dollar-for-dollar fighter in the sport. You make more money per pound fighting Canelo Alvarez than anybody else in boxing, and that's what Crawford wants to do.
I know obviously we've got Canelo-Berlanga just announced, but before we touch on that, what would you make of a Canelo-Crawford fight if we were to see it?
Well, that's an interesting tactical battle. I mean, Crawford is going to have to find ways to be aggressive enough to win rounds and do damage without exposing him to Canelo's counterpunching ability and obviously naturally bigger power. It's hard to imagine that Terence is not at some risk going in against Crawford's counterpunching skill and power. But a lot of people here in the United States thought that Errol Spence had advantages against Terence Crawford. And as soon as the fight began, Crawford began demonstrating that Spence didn't have advantages. Spence was the one who was on the defensive and was going to have to find a way out of the fight one way or the other, and ultimately he got himself knocked out. He fought bravely. He did the best he could. Terence Crawford was a better fighter. And the record shows that so far Terence Crawford's been a better fighter than everybody he's seen. Now he goes in against Madrimov, who is a significantly larger man and has a technical skill background and has a style that's sort of vaguely, distantly compared to that of the great Gennady Golovkin, who was the most eye-catching and spectacular power puncher of his generation until he ran into Canelo. And Canelo has kryptonite, which is the answer to any great puncher. If you can catch and counter, and you can beat the man to the punch in the exchanges, as ultimately Canelo was able to do, you can win that fight, regardless of how big Gennady's punching power was. So now Crawford's going to go in and try to prove that he can take Madrimov's punch just the way Canelo took Gennady Golovkin's punch, and maybe that's a talking point toward the possibility of getting Terence Crawford into the ring against Canelo Alvarez, where the money is in the biggest possible way.
Jim, just picking that back up there, my SD card was about to time out, so I apologise for that. Onto the theme of Canelo Alvarez. Obviously, we know the Berlanga fight has just been announced, and of his recent opponents, people are starting to question if maybe he's somewhat cherry-picking his opposition.
Not just somewhat cherry-picking.
Yeah, so
I mean, the Berlanga thing looks obvious, all right? The guy had a long knockout streak. He got a lot of attention for it. Then he began running into opponents who were able to string him out, make him prove that he could win rounds, et cetera, et cetera. And Canelo long ago demonstrated himself as the master of that game. So now he's a logical and I would say fairly heavy favorite to defeat Edgar Berlanga. And some members of the audience say, well, want to see Canelo take a bigger risk. Fine. Let him take the bigger risk against the guy who's ultimately going to have to cross a 21-pound moat to get to where he is.
That was going to be something which I was going to bring up. When you look at his most recent opponents, when the trilogy with Gennady Golovkin came about, it was years after the second fight. Golovkin hadn't been active in those previous years of his career up until the third fight. Obviously, Jamal Charlo moved up 2 weights. Edgar Berlanga hasn't fought anywhere near that level as what Canelo has. And then obviously you look at Terence Crawford. If he was to move up, as you mentioned, a 21-pound differential up until Saturday night comes around.
Right,
what do you make of it all?
14-pound differential.
Yeah.
And we begin to reframe the argument according to what we see Saturday night. But, unless Terence walks in and delivers a 1 or 2 round knockout, he's not going to come close to solving that equation in the minds of boxing fans in just one night. I don't, in my mind, accept the logical idea that the next fight for Terence Crawford after Madrimov is Canelo Alvarez. I think he's still going to have to find another stone to step on going across this particular pond to make his point that he's the logical opponent for Canelo. At this moment, Canelo is still in the position of being able to say, So he moved up from 147 to 154? Why am I supposed to be impressed with that?
What else do you think that Terence has to do to gain that kind of impressive?
Be really nice if he could hurt Madrimov. It'd be amazing, be spectacular if he could knock him out. He'll solve a lot of questions if he's able to achieve that within this environment. But that looks like an uphill fight. More likely he wins a pretty clear decision and survives maybe getting touched once or twice by a bigger puncher than he has felt before. That's the more likely outcome. But a W is a W. At the end of the day, Crawford's career has been about winning every fight. He wants to come in here Saturday night, point one, win another fight, and let the audience parse out the whole why and how of it afterward.
Somebody else on the undercard everybody's going to look forward to seeing return is Usyk Cruz. What do you expect to see from Usyk Cruz?
Going forward, he is as definitively a go-forward search and destroy fighter as there is in the sport. You want to have a chance to beat Usyk Pitbull Cruz, you're going to have to step up inside of that or stand and take it. So far, he has delivered punishment to all his opponents. He's a very entertaining fighter to watch. This audience in particular is going to love him.
There's obviously a lot of talk at the minute as to what's going to be happening next for Tank Davis. We know that Vasily Lomachenko isn't going to be facing him come November. Would you hold any interest in a potential Davis and Cruz rematch, because options seem to be wearing a little thin at the minute?
Well, they're both extremely entertaining fighters. So why would I say no to watching Tank Davis against Pitbull Cruz, even if they were fighting for the 8th time? I still know I'm going to see contact on contact. I'm going to see a mutual test of wills. I'm going to see courage and perseverance from both fighters. That's the way they do it. Tank will be trying to out-tactic him and land a counterpunch. Pitbull will be trying to walk right past and through all of that. Be a very interesting fight.
The reintroduction of Andi Ruiz Jr. to the heavyweight scene as well on Saturday. Not the most active since his triumph against Anthony Joshua those years ago back in New York. But what are you hoping to see in the Jarrell Miller fight?
Well, does he still have that hand speed? Does he still have technical capability to fight past his opponent's front hand the way that he has in the past? Can he show something that suggests that he can logically be seen in some given instance as a marketable competitor? At this moment, I think the jury's out, and we'll see whether Andi Ruiz still has the capabilities that got him a heavyweight title.
Just some other fights I want to get your thoughts on before we wrap this up. Obviously on the horizon, we saw the Anthony Joshua-Daniel Dubois fight announced up a heavyweight. What do you make of an all-British clash at Wembley Stadium?
Anthony Joshua versus?
Daniel Dubois.
Well, I think that Dubois is earning his way into that conversation. It would be a compliment to Dubois if Joshua accepts the risk and acknowledges Dubois' marketability at that level. I don't know what other options Joshua might be weighing at this point. Could turn out to be exactly the right fight for him.
What would you hope to see then in that fight? Because obviously a lot of people are expecting...
Joshua's chin tested. I would hope to see Dubois land some shots and see whether Anthony still has the will, the competitive desire, the focus necessary to go through that and keep winning. Sometimes when a guy has made as much money as Anthony has made over this long a period of time, it becomes a little bit easier if you're getting punished in the ring to say, I don't really need this. Now, I'm not saying that Anthony Joshua is that kind of personality. I think he wants to please. I think he wants to, go down in history as a truly great British heavyweight. And I think he understands that in order to do that, he goes in against an opponent with a name like Daniel Dubois. He's got to beat him.
Sticking with the theme of the heavyweight division, Usyk Fury 2 just before Christmas. Do you expect to see a repeat or revenge?
Well, it was an extremely close fight. And they were both in the fight all the way down to the finish. I think that there were ways that Fury could have done better, and I think that there are probably some ways in which Usyk could do better. So they'll be looking back at the tape of the first fight. They'll be talking to their trainers. They'll be making adjustments in training camp. Some of them they'll describe to media for their own purposes of setting up their game. Some of them they won't say a word about as they try to keep logical secrets going into the ring. And then eventually they'll get there and we'll find out. The first fight was, in its own odd way, the Ali Frazier one of this generation. Extremely close fight, tremendous competition, one knockdown. The guy who got the knockdown logically got the decision and won the fight. If I am going back in against Usyk in that situation, I'm going to take a little bit more risk to try to knock him down because he knocked me down to win the fight.
final one from me. It's been delayed, but we get it on October 12th. Beterbiev and Bivol. Has an opinion changed at all with the delay and obviously after Beterbiev's injury?
It's just a great fight. It's two really terrific technicians. They both have power. I do think that it's logical to accord to Beterbiev an edge in punching power. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to win the fight. The Bivol who outboxed Canelo Alvarez, supremely confident, in command of his craft, able to choose other options besides the ones right in front of him to continue succeeding in the late rounds. He could win that fight. It's a 50-50 fight. Can't wait to see it.
Jim, I appreciate your time. Obviously, enjoy the rest of your time here in LA. Enjoy Saturday night, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. My privilege.